They say you can tell a lot about your future by a fortune cookie. But what if the cookie doesn't just predict your future? What if it creates it? I sat at a corner table scrolling through my phone while waiting for my takeout. It was quiet, almost too quiet, except for the faint clinking of dishes and the occasional murmurs from other diners. When the waitress finally brought my order, she placed a small paper bag in front of me. On the side, she left a fortune cookie. I picked it up, noticing right away that it didn't look right, misshapen, with dark, jagged cracks running along its surface. I laughed nervously to myself. "Well, that's the ugliest fortune cookie I've ever seen," I muttered, deciding to crack it open. Inside was something strange. Instead of the usual slip of white paper, there was an old, yellowed piece of parchment, the edges frayed like it had been buried for years. The ink on it was black and spidery, almost as if someone had scrawled it by hand. My stomach knotted as I read the words aloud. "Tonight, you will meet your end." I froze, my laugh catching in my throat. "What the hell?" I whispered, glancing around to see if someone was watching me, waiting for my reaction. When no one seemed to notice, I stuffed the fortune into my bag and shook my head. It had to be some kind of weird prank. Even so, I couldn't shake the unease that clung to me as I drove home. The rain had stopped by the time I hit the highway, but the road was still slick and gleaming under my headlights. I kept trying to push the fortune out of my mind, but something about it lingered. That's when the radio cut to static. I jumped at the sudden noise and reached to adjust the dial, but my blood ran cold when I saw a figure standing on the shoulder of the road. It was just for a split second, illuminated by my headlights. I turned to get a better look, and there was nothing there. My heart pounded as I gripped the steering wheel. Moments later, my headlights flickered, plunging the highway into total darkness. For a moment, all I could hear was the sound of my own ragged breathing and the hum of the engine. Then the lights snapped back on. I nearly swerved off the road. By the time I got home, I was completely on edge. My apartment felt different somehow, like the air was heavier. I unpacked my takeout, trying to focus on anything except that darn fortune. But as I pulled the food out of the bag, the parchment fell onto the counter. My hands shook as I picked it up. The message had changed. Now it read, "Your time is running out." My breath caught in my throat, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. The room suddenly felt colder. I told myself it was just my imagination, but then I noticed something moving in the reflection of the kitchen window. A shadow, no, a person, slid across the room behind me. I whipped around, but nothing was there. My pulse was hammering so hard I could barely hear my own thoughts. I tried to distract myself, but the night only got worse. My phone buzzed with a notification and I almost dropped it. When I picked it up, the screen read, "Look behind you." I froze. My eyes darted around the room, but there was nothing. Then the lights began to flicker. In the brief flashes of darkness, I thought I saw shapes in the corners of the room, twisted, moving shapes that disappeared as quickly as they appeared. In the bathroom, I leaned over the sink, splashing cold water on my face. "Get it together," I whispered. When I looked up at the mirror, my reflection stared back at me, but something was wrong. It wasn't moving with me. I tilted my head, but the reflection stayed perfectly still, watching me with unblinking eyes. Then, slowly, it smiled. The grin stretched unnaturally wide, splitting its face like something out of a nightmare. I stumbled back, nearly slipping on the tile. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to destroy the fortune. I grabbed a lighter and held the parchment to the flame. The fire sparked for a moment, but then died instantly, as if something snuffed it out. I shredded it into tiny pieces, my hands trembling. But as I stared at the shredded pieces on the counter, they began to reassemble themselves, stitching back together like they were alive. My breath hitched as I stuffed the fortune into a box and ran to the trash chute. I threw it down and slammed the door shut, finally letting out a shaky breath. I sat on my bed, exhausted. The soft glow of my bedside lamp felt like the only safe thing in the world. For the first time that night, I let myself believe it was over. But then I saw it, the fortune sitting on my nightstand. My stomach twisted into a knot. The writing was blood red now, and it seemed to pulse like a heartbeat.
You shouldn't have eaten the cookie.
The room went black. The lights cut out completely, leaving me in suffocating darkness. The air grew thick, heavy with something I couldn't explain. Then I heard it. The sound of heavy breathing. It wasn't mine. My throat closed up as I sat frozen, unable to move. A loud crack shattered the silence, the unmistakable sound of another fortune cookie being opened. And then came the whisper, soft and distorted. So close it felt like it was in my ear.
Your fortune has been sealed.